That's not on you. I was just filling in time and giving the audience a bit of a backdrop on the GLP-1s and why everybody and their brother is interested in these right now. And I don't think in my time in the benefit space I've ever seen a drug have the kind of visibility and profile that these GLP-1s have. So,
I agree.
right? I don't
And
want
I've
to,
been around for a long, long time in
yeah,
this industry and in pharmaceutical industry before that. So never
yeah.
seen anything like it.
Yep. So I don't want to put us into starting off any later than we already are. So I'm just going to quickly introduce Barb. I've already kind of given the landscape, Barb, and thank you so much for giving us your time today. Barb is really one of the very well-known experts in this field. She's worked for insurance companies for over 23 years in consulting firms, and then has another 13 years on top of that in the pharmaceutical industry. Barb hails from Canada Life, one of OASSIS's great partners. And we've been with Canada Life for many, many years. And I've had the pleasure of listening to Barb speak at many industry events. So I know you will enjoy all that she has to say. So, Barb, thanks again, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. And I actually, when I was a consultant at Mercer, I worked on the OASIS account about 20 years ago.
That's
So
right. We go way
I'm,
back.
yeah, exactly. All right. Well, I'm thrilled to be here to talk to you about the drug landscape in Canada. Feel free to ask questions along the way. I'm going to have a hard stop at around 11 or pardon me, noon or 5 after. Unfortunately, I've got another meeting I'm presenting at. But we'll get through the content and I'll share a copy. Eric, I don't think Eric has shared a copy already of the deck. I'm not sure, but I'll make sure I forward it after. So you do have all the reference material that we're going to talk about today. So I'll just dive right in if that's okay, and in the interest of time. And as I say, please jump in though if you have any comments or questions along the way. So just a little brief update on what's going on with National Pharmacare. We probably all at least heard of it. You know, the federal government announced National Pharmacare as a joint a relationship with the NDP and the Liberals. And it created a single payer model for certain drugs, a very small list of drugs, some birth control medications and certain diabetes meds, not all diabetes meds, not the Ozempics of the world, but a small list of contraceptives. But it does lay the groundwork for future expansion to more drugs. The federal government before the election under Trudeau was anxious to get some provinces signed up for National Pharmacare so that after the election, you know, there would at least be some agreements in place and that would hopefully allow it to continue. And so they did succeed. Manitoba and Prince Edward Islands have launched National Pharmacare programs for those diabetes and contraceptive medications. The Yukon and BC are going to be launching in early 2026. And so there'll be 4 provinces that have signed up. And what that means for group insurance plans is that we cannot pay for those drugs any longer in those provinces. If it's eligible under National Pharmacare, we must decline that claim and force it over to the National Pharmacare program. And we do that through the claim system. You know, when the pharmacist submits the claim electronically, it comes back and says, you know, you need to go to the public plan. Will there be other provinces sign up? You know, we now have a Carney government. It looks probably like not any more imminent provinces will sign up. They want to evaluate what's happening so far. And so we're probably at a bit of a stalemate at this point. Any questions, comments? Okay. I love to talk about how drugs are priced in Canada because I think it's something that a lot of people don't know about, and it's actually quite a problem that we have in this country with respect to the price that's established when a new patented medicine enters the market. So drugs have a 20-year patent, and so under that patent period of 20 years, their price is determined through an agency called the Patented Medicine Prices Review Board, or the PMPRB. And the challenge that we have is that the PMPRB was established in 1987. And what we did back then really doesn't make a lot of sense to do today, but we're kind of stuck with the legislation and the regulations that were developed in 1987, and it's difficult to change those. We've known that the regulations and things need to change, and reforms have been suggested and proposed for many, many, many years, but they've never really succeeded. And so at the end of the day, what's happening in Canada now is, where we were trying to establish low prices for Canadians, we're actually regulating our price in Canada to be among the highest in the world, or among the highest of OECD countries. And part of the reason for that is that in 1987, we chose a basket of 7 countries and said, Canada's price cannot be higher than the median price in these 7 countries. Well, today, some of those countries are the highest drug prices in the world. And so that's what I mean when I say we're regulating our price to be the highest. And so we know things have to change. The reference countries we use and other things do need to change if we're going to bring pricing down. And so some attempts have been made at making changes. And unfortunately, most of the attempts have failed due to lawsuits that have happened by the pharmaceutical companies, who are quite happy the way drugs are priced in Canada. And so have sued the government over making change, and were successful in preventing some of the changes. One of the changes that the courts did agree that the PMPRB could change, is the basket of reference countries. So we're moving to a basket now of 11 countries, throwing out some of the old 7 and adding some new ones in. So I'll talk more about that in the next slides. But what's not going to change, what the court struck down, is disclosing payer rebates and using pharmacoeconomic evaluation and market size to determine the price. And what does that mean? Use of payer rebates for price regulation. What that means is that the PMPRB price is set way up here and nobody's going to pay it. It's kind of a fake price, to be honest. So if you want to get listed on a Canada Life formulary, or Manulife or Sun Life or any carrier, or if you want to get listed on a provincial government formulary, you got to negotiate the price. Bring it down from the price established by the PMPRB. But we are subject to non-disclosure agreements. We have to keep that price a secret. So it's kind of just these secret prices that are happening all over the place. And so the PMPRB said, well, we want to know the real price. Like, what are you actually charging for these drugs? And that was struck down in court. Those secret agreements are going to remain. We also wanted to use pharmacoeconomic evaluation, which means, if a new drug comes out and it's not better than an older drug to treat that disease, it shouldn't really have a higher price. And so, unfortunately, that was struck down in court. And so we're not going to be able to compare one drug to another in the establishment of prices. The other thing was market size. In 1987, we did something that was really smart at the time, which was the pharmaceutical companies were not developing any drugs for rare diseases that small patient populations needed, because, and rightfully so, they said it doesn't make us any money. Like, we'll lose money. We have to invest in research and development. And then if we can't sell the drug to enough people, we won't make enough profit to make it worth our while to develop these drugs. And so in 1987, we said, okay, if you develop a rare disease drug, we're going to let you charge a giant price tag, tens of thousands of dollars, because small numbers of people will use those drugs. And then, but that way, with a high price, you can then recoup your investment, make a profit, and spur the development. Unfortunately, though, what we didn't think of back then, and what typically happens today, is most of those new high rare disease drugs are biologic drugs that end up being used for treatment in many, many different diseases. So what starts with one disease and a small population, that drug can get approved for a second disease and a third disease and a fourth disease and a fifth disease. And next thing you know, you've got a giant population taking that drug. And so we wanted to say, hey, when the size of the market grows, the price should go down. Unfortunately, that's struck down in court, and that is not going to happen either. Here is the basket of reference countries. So we threw out United States and Switzerland. They were outliers that rose our median price, added some other countries. And we do have 11 countries that we're using now. It was originally supposed to happen in 2020, but of course, COVID caused a lot of delays. And then it was going to happen in 2021. And then in 2022, it kind of went into force, the amendments to allow the 11 countries. But the pharmaceutical industry said, well, but if you're going to use a different basket of countries, you're going to change the guidelines and you've got to write new guidelines around how the countries will be used. And so then the whole consultation with the pharmaceutical industry started from July of 2022, 2023, 2024. Finally, this year, we have the implementation and the finalization of the new guidelines around the 11 countries. And one of the big things that changed was in the 7 countries, we used the median price, the halfway point, and said Canada's price can't be higher than that. But under the new guidelines, Canada's price can be up to the highest in those other 11 countries. And what's the end result? Canadian prices for new drugs will be significantly higher than they otherwise would have been. It's a tragedy. And by the way, I do throughout this whole deck have links to the sources of information and where I'm getting this. This is a link to this article that talks about at the end of the day, we have higher prices in Canada. And so please, I hope you will find this deck valuable. You'll go into those links. If you're a nerd like me, you love reading about all this stuff, and you can dive more deeply into a lot of the things I'll talk about today. Any questions or comments about that? I don't know if somebody's talking, maybe not. Maybe somebody's on mute.
I don't see anyone raising their hands to be able to speak right now or any
Okay,
questions in the chat. So if I see something, I will be able to unmute them and call them out, but
that's great. Let me know
nothing so far.
because I've hidden the image to see all of you folks so that I can see the screens fully. So that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Hmm.
So we've got some new treatments coming out on the market, some new treatments for Alzheimer's disease and diabetic kidney disease, both areas where we need new drug development. There isn't a lot that's been really successful, certainly in Alzheimer's disease. We've got 2 new drugs coming. They're not yet approved by Health Canada. We anticipate they'll cost between $40,000 and $70,000. And what they'll do, they're working in a completely different way. They're really going after the plaque that's built up in the brain and removing that plaque. And so, hopefully they'll be successful. There's quite a burden though for treatment. Actually, I think these, I just read last week, I think these have now just been approved by Health Canada. But one of the problems is they're an IV drug, an infusion drug. So you have to go every 2 weeks to have it infused. And then you have to have constant MRIs to ensure there's not brain bleeding. And so, for many members, patients with Alzheimer's disease, the burden of just taking the drug may be so significant that they may not be able to do it. We also have a new cell-based therapy for diabetic kidney disease. So cell-based therapy means they go into your kidney and they harvest your cells, remove them, put the drug into it, and then harvest the cells back into your body. This is not yet approved by Health Canada, but we certainly can anticipate it will be hundreds of thousands of dollars, most likely, because it is a sophisticated cell-based technology. We've got gene therapies on the market that literally cost millions of dollars. They should be one-time treatments, though, representing cures. They alter your genes, and therefore you should go forward without the disease. And they are sometimes successful. The challenge with these is many times they're not successful. And so you've paid $2 or $3 million and the drug failed, and then the member is on other expensive drugs. So, but gene therapies really can represent potential cures and groundbreaking treatments. New drug for postpartum depression, another area where we don't have any targeted treatment. Really, the regular antidepressants are being used or have been used, but this one is targeted specifically to postpartum depression. It's $15,000 US. It is not yet approved in Canada, but it'll be a 2-week treatment, and hopefully it will be something that's quite successful. We also have a new genetic or new disease for a specific genetic type of ALS. $370,000 to $425,000 annually. It is approved by Health Canada, and so hopefully will provide some relief. Often we need real world evidence. We need to see enough people taking it over enough time to really see what the long-term impacts are, but hopefully it will be a successful drug. We've got new drugs coming for MASH. And what is MASH? It's a complicated name. I'm not even going to try and say it, but it really is about fatty livers. And to be honest with you, we all have fatty livers. It's kind of like getting wrinkles. As we age, we get more wrinkles and our liver gets a bit fattier. But for some people, that fat in your liver is causing damage. It can cause cirrhosis and scarring and liver failure. And so we do need treatments. And so about 25% of the adult population has enough fat in their liver, it is considered MASH. And weight loss really has been the only treatment that's been available today, but we've got new drugs coming. And of course, as you can imagine, drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy and Victoza, those GLP-1 drugs that help people lose weight, are under development for the treatment of MASH. And we do expect Health Canada will approve Ozempic, Wegovy, Victoza, one or more of these drugs, even as early as by the end of this year for fatty liver disease. And that brings us into the hot topic of GLP-1 drugs that I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about this morning. So GLP-1, it stands for glucagon-like peptide 1, and it's a naturally occurring hormone in the body that plays a crucial role in regulating blood sugar levels, appetite, and digestion. GLP-1 receptor agonists are drugs that were developed to increase the body's GLP-1 activity. They were originally approved by Health Canada for the treatment of type 2 diabetes, and they're very effective drugs. They really give your pancreas the stimulus that it needs so that your body can get the insulin that you need. You wouldn't typically take a GLP-1 drug for type 1 diabetes because with type 1 diabetes, it means your pancreas does not produce insulin, and so you take insulin. But with type 2 diabetes, your pancreas does produce insulin. It just isn't doing it efficiently in the body. And these drugs do a great job of helping your body give you the insulin that you need. But they have a side effect, and that is to slow down how quickly food travels through the digestive tract. People feel fuller longer, and that results in weight loss. So they're also very effective weight loss drugs. The most commonly known GLP-1 drug is Ozempic, but there are many others. I'm going to talk today and focus on 7 GLP-1 drugs. There's actually more, but these are the 7 most commonly utilized and prescribed GLP-1 drugs. So even though there's 7 drugs on this list, there's really only 3 drugs, and that's why I've put them into buckets. Because what the drug manufacturers do is they brand the drug name based on the disease that it treats. And so we've got the first bucket is a medicine that's called liraglutide, both exactly the same drug, but it's branded under the name Victoza as a diabetes drug, branded under the name Saxenda as a weight loss drug. And this is a daily needle that you would take. The newer generation of GLP-1 drugs became weekly needles and tablets. So we have the second drug I'm going to talk about today called semaglutide, branded under the name Ozempic. It's a weekly injectable for type 2 diabetes. Branded under the name Wegovy, it's a weekly injectable for weight management, also been approved by Health Canada for cardiovascular disease in people who are overweight or obese. And then branded under the name Rybelsus, there's a tablet version of semaglutide. And you would think, why wouldn't anybody take a pill if they could avoid a needle? The truth is that the pill is harder to tolerate. It has to go through your digestive tract. Many people just, their stomach can't handle it. And it's also just not really as effective as the injectable version for either diabetes or weight loss. So most people do take Ozempic or Wegovy if they're eligible on the plan. And then you have the third bucket, which is a drug called tirzepatide. It is also a GLP-1 drug, but it has another hormone in it called a GIP, and I'll talk about that more in a few moments. But it's branded under the name Mounjaro as a weekly injectable for type 2 diabetes and branded under the name Zepbound as a weekly injectable for chronic weight management. And you kind of know that these are marketing terms. I haven't seen any advertisements for Zepbound yet, but I can kind of predict what they're going to say, right? Did you lose a pound? I lost a pound. We all lost a pound with Zepbound. I mean, maybe. It sounds to me like that would be a good marketing thing to do with the drug that's named like that. So we'll wait to see what the advertisements actually show us. When we look at our block of business at Canada Life and really every carrier and every client, because I look at this data all the time, Ozempic is absolutely the number one drug. It represents 6.2% of total drug spending, and the number two drug is, only 1.8. So it's far and away ahead of all the other drugs. If we look back to last year, it was 7.8%, and it went down. Why? Because we put it on prior authorization. So did every insurance company in 2023. We said, stop the presses here. This drug keeps doubling in spending. And we know from social media and all the other things that people are using them off label, using Ozempic for weight loss when it's not approved by Health Canada for weight loss. So the whole industry moved to a prior authorization type process, and that dropped the utilization. So it was 7.8% in 23. It was 4.4 in 22. So it had almost doubled. It was around 2% the year before that. So it had doubled. It was just doubling, doubling, doubling. So we really felt as an industry that we all needed to start to manage this cost and put Ozempic on prior authorization. That's interesting, though. Ozempic was approved by Health Canada in 2018, and it really didn't have much use until starting in 2021. Well, what happened? COVID weight gain. Many, many people started to gain weight. Social media, we were isolated, watching TikTok more often. I can include myself in that. And, people dancing around, talking about all the weight they've lost with this miraculous drug. The drug manufacturers up the marketing spend. If you go to any sports event or look at the billboards, commercials on TV, it's all about GLP-1 drugs. And so that just caused this explosion in the use of Ozempic and interest in GLP-1 drugs in general. So how do standard drug plans cover these drugs? And I think that, most carriers are aligned in how we handle these. And so what we do when we're looking at diabetes, first of all, there are hundreds and hundreds of diabetes drugs eligible on the market in Canada, and they're not GLP-1 drugs, but they really are eligible on standard drug plans. When we isolate just GLP-1 drugs for diabetes, Victoza, that needle a day GLP-1, that is eligible. It doesn't require prior auth. Ozempic and Rybelsus are also eligible on standard drug plans, but they do require prior authorization. Mounjaro, the newest GLP-1, is excluded under smart drug plans. And then provinces would be fairly similar, covering Victoza, Ozempic, and Rybelsus, maybe with some, paperwork that has to be provided. And really nobody is covering Mounjaro, the newest one, because of big concerns about the cost implications. I don't know if you work with NIHB, but some people are quite interested in that. So I've got some more information at the bottom as to how NIHB covers the GLP-1 drugs for diabetes. With respect to weight loss, so there are two weight loss drugs on the market that are not GLP-1 drugs. They've been around for a long time. They're called Xenical and Contrave. And generally speaking, if a plan covers weight loss drugs, these would be eligible and do not require prior authorization. Saxenda, that GLP-1 for weight loss that is a needle a day, that is also eligible on standard drug plans, does not require prior authorization. But if you want to take Wegovy or Zepbound, the newer GLP-1 drugs for weight loss, those are generally excluded under standard drug plans. Now, companies can make their own decisions and say, no, I want to cover them all, So I'm talking about our standards, which would be to exclude Wegovy and Zepbound, but any employer, if they wanted to cover them, could look at adding coverage for those drugs. Very significant cost implications, as we'll talk about, but at the end of the day, it typically is up to the sponsor as to what they want to cover under their drug plan. So really what the industry is doing is trying to balance cost and access, right? We know these drugs work well for diabetes and weight loss. We know members want them and we want to give them coverage, but we also know that these drugs will affect the long-term sustainability of drug plans. And so we're kind of trying to have a balance here. Cover some, but don't cover them all. And that allows access, but cost management at the same time. We're launching a new program, in fact, today, that is going to add additional coverage for these drugs, that are excluded under standard plans. So we call it Smart Plus, and it would allow a plan sponsor to cover Mounjaro and Zepbound and Wegovy at another coinsurance level. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this today. I'm not here to give you a Canada Life sales show. This is about providing you with some good knowledge and education. But let's talk about the implications of covering a drug like Wegovy. And so as you are sitting there on your plans and maybe trying to make decisions, you've got employees, maybe you don't cover them today on all of your different plans, and employees are phoning and complaining and saying, I want coverage, and you've considered adding coverage. This is the kind of cost implications that could occur for a plan that covers Wegovy. And I'm kind of being alarming in these next few slides, but it's to make the point that these drugs are going to really double drug plan spending. And here's why. So if you have 100 employees, we know that 69 of them are going to make a drug claim. That is statistically relevant based on our block. And we know that those 69 people on average are going to claim $1,413. And so we know that your drug plan, if you have 100 employees, is going to cost about $100,000. That's kind of irrefutable data based on the block of business that we have, which is millions of people. And so now this is if you don't cover Wegovy. Let's add Wegovy onto this plan. Well, we know that out of those 100 employees, 30 employees will meet prior authorization criteria. That's based on Stats Canada. 30% of the Canadian adult population is clinically obese, which means they would meet the prior authorization criteria. I'm going to assume that 20 of them make a claim and are approved. At $5,500 for Wegovy, that's $110,000. Your drug plan spending has doubled. Just going to pause here for a moment. It's alarming. It's also not really true. This slide makes it look like it happens overnight. It doesn't. It's going to take a few years, right? Because a lot of people start on the drugs. They don't like the side effects. They stop taking them. Other people then start. And so it takes time to build up a full year of 20 people taking these drugs, but it will happen. And this is just Wegovy, and this is just for weight loss. What about Zepbound, the newest one? It's not $5,000, it's $10,000. That's tripling your drug plan then. What about when these drugs get approved for glaucoma and fatty livers and sleep apnea? You can get a sense of the cost implications of broad coverage of these drugs. And that's why carriers are kind of restrictive in saying our standard is not to cover them all, but if you want to add them, you can add them, but be aware of the cost implications of doing so. And as I said, these drugs are going to be approved for so many other diseases. There are 4 phases to clinical development. We have 69 drugs in phase 3, 34 in phase 2, and another 2 in phase 1 for many diseases that have nothing to do with weight loss, right? Glaucoma, cystic fibrosis, Alzheimer's disease. They're looking at alcohol dependence and other addictions, because while certainly we know these drugs slow down how quickly food travels, and so you feel fuller longer, they're also thinking that these drugs actually work on your brain as well, and on those dopamine receptors that make you crave and want food and maybe alcohol and maybe gambling and other things. And so they're being studied for a host of other types of addictive conditions. So as I say, many, many new diseases are going to be, these drugs will be approved for. We expect sleep apnea and fatty livers to happen before the end of this year or very, very early into next year. What is the cost of these drugs? I've got the prices right here. And it's interesting, the price was kind of hovering around $5,000 a year until recently. And Mounjaro and Zepbound have now doubled their price. What happened was, you can see here, Mounjaro started out at the same price as Ozempic, but Mounjaro was a vial and a needle. You stick the needle into the vial, you pull out your dose, you give yourself a medication. That was $5,400. They then came out with the quick pen very recently, maybe 2 months ago or 3 months ago. So the vial and the needle are in the same device. It's like a tube, and you dial up the dose, you take the cap off, and you give yourself the needle. That doubled the price. That little piece of plastic caused a very dramatic increase in the price. And now we're looking at over $10,000 a year. Starting in year 2, you start on a smaller dose and then you graduate up. So the price tag now is 10. I think any new players that come into this game are going to be priced at 10, not 5. So increase is coming. Price is not the only thing we have to look at, though, when we look at how much will a drug cost a drug plan. Coordination of benefits is a big factor. That's why, standard plans do cover Ozempic, but don't cover Mounjaro. Because with Ozempic, everybody covers it. Provincial drug plans, NIHB, all of the carriers cover it. If with Mounjaro, that's not the case. Pretty much nobody's covering it unless a plan sponsor has made the choice to add it. But what happens then, you take claims from Sun Life and Manulife and NIHB and everybody else because the other carriers and public plans are not covering it. So through spousal plans and coordination of benefits, your plan would pick up the cost for all those other plans. So COB has a big impact on total drug spending. So does how the drug is taken. We've got monthly needles coming. That's going to up the number of people that want to take it, up the cost then. We've got more oral tablets coming that are going to be easier to tolerate. Again, will increase the volume of people that want them. We're going to have a lot of social media and advertising around the new drugs. It'll drop off for the Ozempics of the world that are going generic probably next year. There'll be no advertising, no marketing, no hype. There'll be old news. Nobody's going to want those drugs anymore because social media and advertising will drive the awareness of the new drugs. And then there's product listing agreements as well. We can negotiate drug prices with drug manufacturers. And so as we get more competition in the space, more different manufacturers will be able to leverage and hopefully negotiate some lower prices. The prices I've shown you today are patented medicine prices, review board prices.
Hey, Barbara. Sorry, just a question from my end because this is super interesting. Can you talk a bit more about that long-term price preview of where things might go with the fact that there might be more coming into the market, but also for more conditions and like longer term in 5, 10 years? Are you seeing this same type of thing, or is it eventually going to be like, oh, these are going to drop down in prices, or like that longer term picture on the pricing?
That's a good question. And no, I don't see prices coming down. They'll come down when generics are out, but people won't want the generics because those will be the old drugs. And unfortunately, what do doctors always ask before they write a prescription? Do you have a drug plan? Is it covered? They don't take cost into account. It's really often, more the marketing and the sales reps and the advertising and the education doctors are getting. That kind of thing is driving prescribing towards the newer drugs. And so you just don't get price competition when that happens, right? In order to have price competition, you need consumerism. And consumerism happens when I want something, I choose what I want and I pay for it. Like if I want to buy a car, I have to shop around and see what cars are out there, decide what car I want. I have to pay for it myself and I'm going to drive that car. But with drugs, it's not like that, right? I don't choose my drug, my doctor does. I don't pay for my drug, my plan does. And so we don't have that traditional consumerism competition that will drive down the price with medications. That's where we have to do it with product listing agreements. But as I go back here, it's a little tough right now because there's only 2 players in the game, Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly. We're going to have more different drugs coming. Once we've got enough different players, that will give us more leverage to then negotiate prices and say, some of you are in, others are out, give us a better price. And so that is where that lowering of price will happen, is more through those negotiated secret prices. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it really did. Thank you.
What happens when a drug goes generic? If it's a high volume drug, oh my goodness, the price drops a lot. Here's an example with Lipitor, brand name, 20 milligram. If you take that brand name drug today, it's $1,029 a year, not including the markup and the dispensing fees. But if you take the generic, it's about $80 a year, like way less. So do I expect that kind of pricing will happen when generics become available for these drugs? Yeah. I expect generic Ozempic, instead of being $5,400, will probably be about $500. Because there's 20 different generic companies all lining up to talk to the insurance companies, cover my generic, and there'll be lots of competition on the price there. But as I say, it won't really matter because those drugs are going to be old news by the time the generics come around. We're already seeing it, right? The sales rep that's in selling Ozempic to the doctor is winding down. There's no reason to go in. The generics are coming, but the Mounjaro sales reps are winding up and really trying to encourage doctors, get everybody, switch them off of Ozempic and move them on to Mounjaro. People will, in fact, lose more weight with Mounjaro than they will with Ozempic. And even if you're using it for diabetes, many type 2 diabetics do need to lose weight. And so that would be probably one of the sales messages in the doctor's office. They'll lose more weight, therefore they'll be healthier. Therefore, you should switch them from Ozempic to Mounjaro. So again, another risk of broadening coverage to the newer drugs is there'll be a lot of switching that happens from old drugs to new drugs. And then you won't be able to get the benefit of these low generic prices that are likely to come. Now, when I said that you lose more weight with Mounjaro and Zepbound than you do with Ozempic and Wegovy, that is absolutely true. And part of it is because Ozempic and Wegovy are just a GLP-1 drug. Mounjaro and Zepbound are not. They're a GLP-1 drug mixed with what's called a GIP agonist. And when you add that additional hormone, it even further slows down stomach emptying. So you lose more weight. The newer generations that are coming will have GIPR antagonists and glucagon dual agonists. I'm not going to read the fine print here. You'll get a copy of the deck so you can read more up about that. But these drugs are likely to continue to have even additional impacts on more weight loss. And that will help things like sleep apnea and fatty livers, etc. as well. So the newer drugs will become probably the drugs of choice. But it isn't always good to have more weight loss. We've got a warning of severe, serious, and fatal malnutrition from Health Canada for Mounjaro. It doesn't exist for Ozempic and Wegovy, but with Mounjaro, you are losing more weight, but you may not be able to actually eat enough to get proper nutrition, and that causes organ damage, can cause organ damage, and you can even die from the damage to your organs caused by malnutrition. So doctors are now being warned by Health Canada about that risk. So you shouldn't just assume that losing more weight makes you healthier. And not only that, we're finding in those newer generations that aren't out yet, in the research, in the clinical trials, they're going, holy mackerel, people are losing too much weight too fast. Like these almost work too well. And if you want to lose weight, that's a great thing. But when you lose too much weight too quickly, you cause other health risks, right? Lower bone density. You lose muscle mass and not fat, or more muscle mass than you want. And I mentioned earlier, a lot of people don't stay on these drugs very long. They're on for a year or two. They might lose weight if that's why they were taking them, but then they gain the weight back after they've stopped the drug, but they don't get the muscle mass back. They don't get the bone density back. So it can be left with even a worse health situation than they started with. And now we've got add-on drugs coming, because you lose so much muscle mass with Zepbound, there's a new drug coming that's going to protect your muscles. And so, I don't know, coat them in aluminum or titanium so they get preserved and your body focuses more on fat loss. But what's that going to cost? Another 10 grand? Now it's 20 grand, 10 grand for Zepbound and another 10 grand for the muscle mass drug. Like, where does this all end? There's going to be more and more and more drugs coming out for more and more of the side effects that are caused by these drugs. Lots of new ones coming. We've got oral dailies. We've got a monthly injection coming from Amgen, and see the different drug manufacturers. So we're going to have more competition, different companies getting involved, and that will allow us to hopefully do some better additional price negotiations. Now, some people say, well, if people lose weight, they should be healthier, right? They're reducing their risk of heart disease, stroke, diabetes, those kinds of things. But that's a wonderful theory that's not really borne out in evidence, because if you have an unhealthy diet, you are at similar risks of heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. Same thing for sedentary lifestyles, right? You can be thin, but if you're sedentary, you're at risk of high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, etc. And these drugs can cause a lot of fatigue, so maybe even reducing the amount of activity that people are having. So we really have to think about how can we support people taking GLP-1s for their nutrition and for their physical activity so they really can get healthier. Because losing weight's kind of the tip of the iceberg. It's way up here, and you can lose weight. You're not maybe necessarily healthier. It's unpacking what's underneath the iceberg that actually makes you healthier. And this is where I speak at a lot of conferences and I do a lot of meetings like this. And I like to bring in my personal story because I had an eating disorder for some of my teens, all of my 20s, part of my 30s. And in my opinion, this is just Barb Martinez's opinion, I kind of see Wegovy as the new bulimia. Like I was thinner, but I don't think I was healthier. And what I had to do was unpack what's under that iceberg. I had to get mental health support. I had to learn how to eat healthy. I had to learn how to exercise. And when I say I had to learn it, I mean I had to learn it because when I was in my 20s, I was dealing with my eating disorder and I was getting mental health and I was getting nutrition help and learning how to eat healthy diet. But the sedentary lifestyle thing was a real challenge to me because I grew up in a family that just didn't put me in any sports. I really did no sports. And so I went through high school with my peer group, my friends, none of them did sports either. So there I am in my 20s. I'm in the working world now and I'm not active. And so I did what I thought you should do. I joined the gym, and I probably joined the gym 3 or 4 times, and I would just leave in dismay and failure, right? Because I'd walk in there, I didn't know how to use the equipment. I felt like everybody's staring at me and I looked fat, and I would just leave in tears. And we didn't have workplace wellness programs back then, but I had some colleagues that worked out regularly, would go to the gym at lunch. And I went to them and I said, can I join the same gym as you? And can you show me how to do this? I sometimes get emotional when I talk about it. Those are some of my best friends today. They changed my life, and my workplace is what changed my life. And so we sometimes think about wellness programs as, they're just about people having fun and they're not really important. I think that they're so important. Work can be the only place that some people have to get that camaraderie and that peer support and that knowledge and to get all the other support that's underneath that iceberg, right? Our benefit plans cover nutrition, cover mental health, cover physical wellness and activities. And so that's what we really, really need to deliver in order for people to be healthier. I think a lot of times, though, people just don't know what is eligible, what supports they have. And so, my strongest recommendation is to really know yourselves. What does your plan cover? What are all of the places? Is it EAP? Is it your group insurance plan? Are there other providers that give support to mental health, nutrition, and physical health? And create education strategies around those so your members know what benefits they have and they access. If they're taking a GLP-1 drug, let them know what access they have to these other supports. And that is what will go a long way to making people actually healthier. So, in closing, we're certainly headed for drug plan inflationary trends like we've never seen before, largely driven by these GLP-1 drugs. Plans really need to look at what do I have to support nutrition, physical activity, and mental health, develop an education strategy, and then decide what your own philosophy and objectives are for the plan. Some plans are in attraction and retention mode, and I need to have generous benefits because I want to attract high quality people and retain the good people I have. Other plans are wanting to mimic, what's in my industry. What do other employers in this industry cover? And I want to mimic that. That would be a philosophy or objective. Other plans are fiscal restraint, man. Finances come to HR and said, we can't afford it. You got to make some cuts, right? And so those kinds of that thinking, those philosophy and objectives will help determine how you should design your drug plan and what kinds of programs you want to make available. So we have a few minutes left. I do want to just say something to make you smile. We had a little contest at the office and said, if they made a movie in Hollywood about GLP-1 drugs, what would the movie be called? Rebel Sis Without a Cause, 12 Once Hungry Men, The Wizard of Ozempic, The Silence of the Appetites and Mission Slim Possible. I know I threw a lot at
Thank
you
you.
very quickly.
No, this is great. I think I'd go with Mission Slim Possible for mine.
I think that's my favorite too.
Yeah. So if people wanted to ask questions, you can always use the chat or raise your hand,
Yeah.
teacher. We have a few minutes for questions. I don't see any coming in, but this was a really good presentation. I'll pass it over to Isaac now.
Yeah, so thanks, Patrick, and thank you, Barbara, again for that fantastic conversation. Very, very informative. I'll get my screen on here so people can see me as well. Doesn't seem to be working for me, so apologies for that. But yeah, glad you can hear me. Yeah, thank you, OCSA, for setting this up alongside Barbara and Canada Life. Very glad to see a lot of recognizable names in the chat. Both OCSA members and OASSIS members in general. Again, appreciate OCSA allowing all OASSIS employers to be able to join today. So yeah, these slides and this presentation is being recorded, so they will be made available to you, so you're able to have it and refer back and share it with other colleagues who weren't able to make it today. So just want to reiterate that. And yeah, I think that's about it for me. So yeah, glad we were able to finish under the wire here, and yeah, glad we were able to find you, Barb, in the right chat room here. Apologies again for that. So
Thank you. And I know
yeah,
I spoke really quickly in the interest of time, but if you have follow-up questions, reach out. I'd really love talking about drugs.
and your email is in the slides, correct?
Yes. If I'll make sure,
Okay.
I'm going to send a PDF just so everybody has it, and I'll make sure if it isn't in there, I'll put it in there.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, you have the green light there, everybody, to email Barb directly if you have questions. I know there's many to be had, so yeah, she's the right resource here. So yeah, that's about it from me. Any more, Patrick or Carla?
No, that's everything. I just want to again say thank you to Barbara. This was really interesting. A lot of different knowledge, a lot of things I wasn't sure what to expect from the presentation, but it was captivating. It was super interested, and you told a really great story about the impacts and where it's going. So again, thank you for taking the time, and thank you to everyone for joining us. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll share the recording shortly with everyone.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks
Barbara.
again, everybody. Take care.
Yeah.